This video will cover the replacement of the front brakes and rotors on the 2002 Nissan Maxima. Here you're going to notice some of the parts and tools that we use to complete this job. You'll see the pliers, socket set, ratchets, a wire brush. We also have a clothes hanger there that's going to be used to suspend the brake caliper. Also a lug wrench, Brakleen, liquid wrench or WT-40 is fine. We also have the Haynes repair manual with all the torque specifications for the bolts that we'll be removing, as well as a hammer that will be used to remove the rotor. We also have some sandpaper and a sand block there. Some of the other parts you don't see in this image are the replacement rotors and brake pads. In this particular video, we use Brembo rotors, brake pads or Bosch. We also don't see the strap wood and the C-clamp that I use to compress the caliper piston, as well as the brake grease. The first thing we want to do is open up the brake fluid reservoir and remove the front wheel. First we're loosening up the lug nuts, then we'll raise the vehicle up and remove all the bolts and get the wheel off the automobile. After the wheel's removed, we're going to go ahead and remove the two bolts that attach the brake caliper. As you can see here, there was a little difficulty removing the lower bolt, so what we did was we turned the steering off to the left, which gave us easier access to the bottom bolt and made the job a little easier. Now once we get that brake caliper off, we want to hang it up somewhere nice and secure using that clothes hanger to make sure we don't ruin any of the brake hoses. Now we have to go ahead and remove these two bolts from the back of the caliper mounting bracket. This is required for us to get the rotor off of the hub. Here you're going to see me make use of a breaker bar, which makes this job very easy, especially when you're trying to get those two bolts off of the caliper mounting bracket. At this point you can just pull the rotor off. In this case the rotor came right off easily. I have had situations where I was forced to hit the rotor with a heavy hammer to dislodge it, but in this case it came right off. And here we're cleaning off the hub with a wire brush, and we're going to go ahead and put a little grease on there so that hopefully next time when we have to do this job the rotor won't be seized onto that hub. Here you see me just cleaning off the bolts from the caliper mounting bracket and the caliper with a little bit of the liquid wrench just to get a little rust off or whatever other sediment that's on those bolts. Here we're simply just applying a little bit of grease to the hub for the installation of the new rotor. During this portion of the video, we have brought over the new Brembo rotor. These particular rotors need to be cleaned off before they're mounted because of the way they're packaged. So here you see me using the Brakleen, and eventually we'll bring that over and use our sandpaper and block to prep these up for mounting. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and use our sandpaper and block to go ahead and remove the glaze from the brake disc. So here you'll see me using a sort of circular motion lightly on that rotor just to get past that glaze. Now we'll just go ahead one more time and just use our Brakleen on that rotor, and we'll go ahead and mount it on the hub. Here you'll also notice that I'm going ahead and putting one of those lug nuts, actually two of them, to hold the rotor in place. Here I'm going to go ahead and clean off the old brake shims. Sometimes you'll get the brand new ones that ship with the brakes. In this case, the brake shims were in good shape and they were the OEM, so I decided to just clean them off and reuse them. Here we're going to go ahead and make use of some of the high temperature grease for the different parts of the caliper bracket. This will allow the brake pads to move freely back and forth through this bracket. Also, we'll be using that same grease on the caliper pins. Here you'll also see me apply some of this high temperature grease to the pad retainers. The touch points on the brake pads will also get a little bit of this high temperature grease as well, so that they can move freely in this bracket. And then now we'll go ahead and uh, replace the caliper mounting bracket. Now I wouldn't attempt this job without the use of torque wrenches. Now for the caliper mounting bracket, you're looking at somewhere between 28 and 38 foot-pounds. Now, if you don't have this tool, I'd really discourage you from even attempting this job. But with this, with the proper torque wrenches, you'll get these bolts back on to spec. All we're doing here is removing the caliper pins and applying that high temperature grease to both pins. Here you're going to see me apply the high temperature grease to the touch points on the brake pads that will be coming in touch with the pad retainers. You'll also notice the red coating on the back, which will touch the caliper piston. That's a brake quiet. That requires a certain amount of time to set, so I had done that a little bit ahead of time there. Here we're going to begin to work on getting the caliper back in place. So here we're going to remove it from our clothes hanger. Then we have to use the block and C-clamp to compress the piston and put it back into place. Otherwise, you won't be able to get the caliper back over the two brake pads and back onto the bracket. This process can only be done with the front brakes. You cannot do this with the rear brakes. Rear brakes do require a special tool that require you to turn and also compress that piston back in place. But on the front brakes, all you need is a wood block like you see here and a C-clamp to push the piston back into the caliper housing. Now that the piston's back in place, we can go ahead and place the brake caliper back over the brake pads and onto the caliper mounting bracket. So now we're going to go ahead and put the bolts back in place for the brake caliper. Once again, if you do not have torque wrenches, I would really avoid this job. If you over torque these two bolts, you'll have a very long day ahead of you to get replacement parts. The torque specifications on the brake caliper are 16 to 23 foot-pounds, or about 240 inch-pounds. So if you're going to go ahead and do this, make sure you do have the proper torque wrenches to get those bolts back in place. At this point, we're just tightening up the bolts. Right here, we're going to go ahead and torque the bolts for the caliper mounting bracket. And here we're going to go ahead and tighten the caliper bolts with our smaller torque wrench. The brake caliper has about 16 to 23 foot-pounds. Once again, be very careful not to over torque that. And then here's our finished product. New rotors, new brake pads in place. At this point, we're just going to straighten up the steering column and put the wheels back into place, and don't forget to cover up the brake fluid reservoir. This concludes our video of the 2002 Nissan Maxima brake pad and disc rotor replacement. I hope this video was helpful. Please subscribe to our channel. See you soon.